Yes, we're live now with Carson HEADY. How are you, Carson?
Matt, I'm wonderful as always. How are you?
Excellent. So Carson is a sales genius, and we're going to talk today a little bit about social selling. Carson, what do you think is social selling? What's your definition?
Yeah, it's a great question because, frankly, there's a variety of different ways to define it. Personally, I think social selling is a way to leverage different tools, like in social media, and the different aspects that we have access to with the power of the internet, in order to leverage that into selling. And because of that, you can enhance your chance at probability of success. So don't forget, sales is all about probability of success at each step of the process. Whether you're prospecting, whether you're conducting follow-up, providing valid information to your client while they're formulating their buying decision, or whether it's a post-sales relationship. There are many different aspects to that dynamic, and ultimately what we're trying to do is enhance our chance at success at each. I feel that social selling gives us a greater probability at success because it's a way to stay top of mind, but in a relatively passive way a lot of times. There's also a lot of ways that we can leverage different tools in order to better prospect, better connect, and better provide information to our clients.
What's sort of the general strategy for social selling that you would recommend to drive sales, of course?
First and foremost, I want to make sure to point out that the most important thing to remember when social selling is that the social game, while very important, and while it can greatly enhance your probability at success, it never replaces the face-to-face. The face-to-face is the most important piece. The relationship is the most important part of the selling process and the post-sales process. However, I do want to say that with social selling, you can enhance your prospecting. You can enhance your process of reaching out to clients, whether that's initial contact, staying top of mind with them, sending different articles that you find, and then furthermore, finding a way to kind of complement what your outreach may normally look like. Sure, you're going to still follow up with clients, but there's different ways whether you're sharing a newsletter or whether you're sharing an event schedule or different events. There's things that you can do to stay top of mind with your clients. So. The mechanisms of social selling can start out with prospecting. I've had a lot of success in actually going out and I can look in my backyard. I can geo-target folks that I'm specifically looking for a certain client size. There's a litany of different sites that will give you very valuable intel on different clients. Now, one thing that I like to do here too is the numbers game, because especially too if you're looking at prospecting for a wide number of customers, you don't want to spend a ton of time necessarily prepping because again, you may not get responses from any of these folks. I had a situation last year where I was actually looking at several different clients, potential clients, that were showing up on different reports that we had, but the accounts had not been signed. So I knew that there were prospects there. Spent a lot of time out on social media looking up these potential prospects, trying to find different people that were working at those organizations. I could view them by seniority, by title, and different roles within the business. So it helped my prospecting because I was able to actually go out and look for specific people. But again, it's a numbers game. You have a chance of success of each of these folks responding and being responsive to your outreach. So, my philosophy is try to spend as little time as possible actually looking for the person, but do it in strength in numbers and reach out to 10, 15, 20 people at the client. Your probability of getting a response is higher. And frankly, once you talk to a couple of these folks, they're going to tell you, hey, you need to talk to so-and-so. And then that's who you go after from that point. And that's how social selling can help you broker that initial introductory meeting and help you prospect. Furthermore, when you're reaching out to clients, I've got potential clients and I've also got a lot of longtime clients or people that I've just maintained a relationship with over several years. There's a lot of different websites that are out there where you can look at kind of called article media. You can look at called video media, and it can help you not only spend 5-10 minutes in the morning to load your social media accounts to spit out articles throughout the day, but it can also help you from finding finding some of this content. And, if I see something that I know, hey, I talked to, Mr. Johnson at XYZ company about this just last week, I'm going to take 5 seconds out of my day, send him this note, send him this article, and say, hey, what are your thoughts on this? I was curious. I saw this, thought of you. It's a great way to stay top of mind, because keep in mind, part of always being selling is not about always being selling. You don't want to only reach out to your clients when you want to get some business. It's kind of like a relationship. You don't only want to buy flowers for your girlfriend or your wife when you want them to be affectionate toward you. So you're constantly cultivating these relationships. Social selling is a great way to reach out, stay top of mind by sending these articles and posting valid material. Lastly, again, throughout the process, it's a great way of following up and complementing, the different sales motions that you're going through. I've found that when I've sent out newsletters to clients, I've found that when I've sent out events to clients, or just bulletins or different things that are going on, or even just asked basic questions. This could be as simple as, reaching out to seeing if somebody has interest in speaking at one of your upcoming events, if somebody has interest in a different offering that just came out, could even be an incentive or a freebie, an event, or, even if they had interest in being a part of a group of people, meeting to discuss some topic that was relevant to their industry or their business. It's a way to stay top of mind. I've had a lot of these times where I've sent out a newsletter and I've got a customer that has not responded to multiple emails that I've sent checking in on the status of their project. But then they see that event invite, they realize they owe me a response, and then they email back. So you never know. There's a lot of marketing statistics that are out there. A lot of them will say it takes 5 to 8 touches before you're able to earn the business, or they'll make that buying decision on average. So it's a great way to really work smart and work effective and continue to be in front of the client without always having to try to go for the sale.
I know that social media is great for building relationships, and that's something you just mentioned as well. How do you turn those relationships into sales? How do you go from nurturing the relationships, getting to know new people as well, new leads, and then how do you have a call to action, or how do you convert those leads or those relationships into sales?
Absolutely. It's a great question. And I think it's important to look at each step of the selling process as one individual piece that you want to do everything you can to give yourself the best likelihood of success. So if you're sending an invitation, or you're following someone on a social media platform, I think it's important to personalize the experience. Send them a note. And I know a lot of times there are standard ways that can be done. There's maybe a default or a template message that goes to them. Change that up a little bit. Tell them, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, the reason I wanted to reach out, based on your experience in this field, or your expertise, I felt I could learn something from you. I felt like I could learn a little bit about your industry vertical. I'd love to hear more about what you're doing in this space, what your thoughts are, or really just how I can be better of value. Would love to connect, would be honored to be part of your network, that sort of thing. It gives you a better chance that they will accept your invitation. From there, you don't want to be too opportunistic. I think it's important to maybe give it a few days. Maybe once they've accepted, then that's where you do a little bit more of your homework. That's why I don't say to do a ton of homework about your potential prospect up front, because frankly, you never know who's going to accept and who isn't. So once they've accepted, spend a couple of days, do a little bit of homework. Don't seem too opportunistic. Maybe you find an article at that point. You send it over to them. I'm interested in your thoughts. Maybe you send them a note and just say, hey, we've got this, our business feels like this about your industry. I see a lot of this. What are your thoughts on that? And just the impact of different variables that are going on in their business, whether it's the economy or whether it's, things that they've been seeing from a financial standpoint. You want to spark a conversation at that point. And again, you're not trying to sell them anything other than a meeting at this point in time. I'd love to meet or chat about how I may best be of value, or I'd love to meet or chat just to kind of get your thoughts or your feedback. I'm really trying to break into this industry, and I'd love to get your thoughts and feedback on it as I do so. So I think that's how you turn it into a potential prospect. From there, turning a social media contact into a sale is everything that we've talked about up till now. Making sure that you're geo-targeting, making sure that you're strategically prospecting with social media, but also staying on top of mind with these folks. That's one philosophy that I learned years ago, is just how do you find different ways to stay top of mind with these folks? Post very relevant articles onto your different social media platforms, because again, they're able to read these things on their timeline. It's very passive, which a lot of our buyers like that. Keep in mind, you're trying to get them to make a change of their pattern, their process, based on what you believe is better for them, and they're not going to change unless they see that your process is better than their process. So continuing to show them things that they can view on their own timeline is great. And then furthermore, if you see a few articles here and there that you think would be relevant based on the conversations that you've had with that prospect, absolutely send those over. Some of these relationships turn around very quickly. Some of them can take a long period of time. And it's all about continuing to move forward in the selling process. So you've prospected this lead, you've reached out, you've made contact. Your goal at this point is broker that face-to-face. Once you've done that, you go in, do a needs analysis, make sure you're following your selling process. Do a needs analysis, try to match up their needs with things that your product or service or solution does. And then ultimately, you're going to utilize social selling to continue to stay top of mind while you're following up. The same thing too, and we talked about this on a recent session, was about the importance of that post-sales relationship as well. Just because the client buys something doesn't mean that relationship ever stops. You're going to have new offerings. There's going to be new trends in the industry, and there's going to be different other things that are going to be thought-provoking that you're going to want to have a conversation with this client about. So social selling is a huge, very valuable tool that will enhance your chance every step of the way.
We have a question here from Guillaume. He says, I have a successful spiritual jewelry shop and I am merging another yoga shop with a famous yoga teacher as their brand. Selling will be really different. Any advice for someone that's beginning to merge something like this? Any books on social selling that you would recommend?
Yeah, it's a great question. I admit I learned most of what I've learned about social selling two ways. One, by doing a lot of extensive research online, and two, trying by doing, and just trying different things, because frankly, what I would have said about this years ago has changed dramatically and continues to change because of the different platforms that are available and because of the different types of results that you can get. Things can pop up and there's different sites, and frankly, I've used a lot of different sites over the years to really optimize that social media experience. But one thing that I've noticed, and I use Twitter a lot, and I use some other platforms, one of which, and in full disclosure, I'm a Microsoft employee, and we made a purchase of LinkedIn a few years ago, so I'd be remiss not to point that out. But there are some very valuable tools in being able to utilize Twitter to see who's following the other folks that are maybe very similar to you in nature or that are competitive to you in nature. As an example, so I've written a few sales books, and I follow, not only do I follow a lot of sales leaders and sales writers, but I also follow a lot of their followers, and I've found that by doing so, I've had a lot of very good conversations. So if you're merging businesses and you want to play up both platforms, you can do a variety of things, and we talked earlier about geo-targeting your potential leads, but not only can you geo-target your leads, but you can also go out and look for people that are necessarily your competitors. In advertising, we had a saying, you're in essence trying to put a billboard up in between your potential buyer and your competitor. You want them to look at you over them. So again, think about who your target audience is. Make sure you're following and engaging that target audience, and find different ways to continue to engage them. If you're making changes in your business, it's a great time to maybe make a poll or ask questions. Put it out there to the audience. And I also want to make sure that to point this out, be responsive. Nobody likes these platforms more than the folks that get responses from businesses or even from high-ranking officials at different companies. I read all the time about the response times of some of these companies and the people that are replying. And I know, Elon Musk actually replies directly to clients a lot of times, and I think that's impressive as heck. Because ultimately, there's no better way to utilize and leverage social media than being responsive and putting out quality content. So I think, again, stay true to your fundamentals of making sure that you're putting out quality content, and be very mindful of what your longer term goals are. You're building a community around your business, so think about the people that you would want to be in that community, and those are the people that you target to be prospects.
What sort of balance should you have between social selling and offline selling?
What kind of balance? Yeah, it's a great question. I'd say still, I get up every morning and, when my workday starts, I'm on social media for a few minutes to load out kind of what is going to go out during the day for my my different social accounts. What's the right content, what's the right material, and I try to spend a very small amount actually sending things out. More time is spent in the responsiveness and in looking at the trends and looking at what people are talking about in your industry, but again, it's not something that you have to have a constant pulse on. You want to allot a little bit of time daily to do this, to plant seeds. Because again, you're the person that you're targeting today on social media, you may not actually meet them for days, weeks, months. And there's also, again, there's strength in numbers. You want to ultimately be planting a lot of seeds that these relationships can come to fruition down the road. Your goal up front is to find people with whom to have these business relationships with. So 95% of my time is still offline selling. But that's a great question, because even though that's 95% of my time physically, there are still times throughout the day where I'm checking in to see who's responding to things. What are they responding to? Are there things that I want to maybe send a note to somebody that's liked or commented on one of these articles? Are there clients that I want to make sure that I'm sending these articles to? So a very small percentage of time is physically actually spent on the social selling piece, but it is so invaluable, especially when getting these meetings. I've had extremely large deals that have come out strictly from social selling because I knew that an opportunity existed. I used social selling to find the person where I wanted to find them, to communicate with them, to find the ultimate decision maker, and to broker the meeting, all through social selling. From there, though, the rest of that relationship is offline, because I'm maintaining the relationship. I'm out there in person with them. We're bringing in the right resources. We're putting together the deal. We're negotiating. We're closing that deal, and then we have a post-sales relationship. So while a very small piece of that was social selling, the relationship would never have existed without it.
How important is content creation for the social sales process?
I think content creation is key, but also just finding good quality content. I've found through my experience, and again, I'm not the end-all be-all on social selling. I'm just a guy who enjoys it and has had some success doing it and loves talking about it. It continues to evolve. It's ever-changing, and I think that's the greatest thing about it. I blog and I like to write articles and I share a lot of that, but at the same time too, if I find good quality content elsewhere, it's just as thought-provoking and it's just as easy to have a conversation around and engage clients with. So I think content creation is important, especially when you're differentiating your own personal brand. The question that came up earlier about the merged shop and running your business and making changes with your business. I think it's extremely important, and I tell people that I work with all the time, it's very important that you're blogging about what you're doing, that you're writing about these experiences, that you're accumulating references, and you're talking about your go-to-market strategies and your successes, because if you're not, very few others, if anybody, will. So I think content creation that is furthering your personal brand is critical. However, it doesn't have to be everything you share. You also want to share, I think it's great too when you're building other relationships with folks in social selling, share the things from those thought leaders. Matt, I share some of your stuff that I see. I share things from other folks that I've worked with in the past, like Jeffrey Gittimer and Jeb Blunt. And I'm sharing good quality content. There's no substitute for good quality content, but at least make sure some of the content you're sharing is about your own personal brand and what you bring to the table. Because at the end of the day, you want folks to look up and take notice.
I have some stats here. 65% of new businesses come from referrals. 84% of decision makers begin their buying process with a referral. And referred customers spend on average 13% more than regular customers. So referrals are extremely important to grow your business, right? So how can you use social media to maximize your referrals?
I love that question. That'll never change. I was having a conversation about this the other day. Word of mouth will always be the number one source of advertising and new business. And I think that where social selling fits into that is a few different ways. It's a great way to stay top of mind with your existing referrals. Existing people that you're working with that may potentially refer you business. Because if they see you, they see your name, they see your presence in the social selling stratosphere, they're like, hey, I've got a lead that I could give this guy. And you want to do that. I also like social selling for a great way you can find almost anything or anyone. So think about this. Who would be a good referral? Who would be a good referring party? Who would be somebody that I could join forces, and have a mutual beneficial selling relationship? So case in point, look at somebody else that maybe is in your industry that does something similar, but that there are some gaps. There are things that you do that they don't do, and there's things that they do that you don't do. Find those folks and reach out to them and just say, hey, was interested in, I think very highly of you and your business. I'd love to meet up or chat about how we may be able to form a partnership. You guys sell this, we sell this. I see some potential for cross-pollination here, and I'd love to talk about that. Because here's the thing at the end of the day. Even your competitors, and I've seen this in many different industries over the last several years, but even with competitors, there's a lot of opportunity to conceivably partner. And if there's a way that I can bring value to them, that's my in. Because that's all we're doing as sellers, is looking for ways to bring value to the people that we're talking to. That doesn't always have to be an end user client. It can be a person that's giving you referrals and referring business to you. So I think it's important that you're looking at different ways in order to broker those types of relationships. But then at the same time, utilization of social selling can only expand your playing field. Because again, they say it all the time in career, you're as strong as your network. Well, network can expand in a millisecond, and it can expand exponentially with the power of social selling. So use social selling to make more word of mouth. Use social selling to make more relationships with people that could refer you business, and vice versa. And think about it from this vantage point. It makes you stronger, because if rather than when a client says, hey, I need somebody that does this, rather than saying, we don't do that, I apologize, it's, hey, you know what? I actually work with this guy over at XYZ company, would love to broker the conversation. I've done that to competitors before. I've introduced direct competitors for certain solutions in the past. Because frankly, I'd rather be the guy that brought value. They know that they can come to me to shoot them straight and to answer the right questions. And that's why ultimately, if you're responsive and you take care of your clients and add value every conversation, that's why they're going to do business with you. I wasn't afraid that I was going to lose my core business with them to a competitor, but I knew that they needed a competitor for that individual piece. And I happened to have connections at that competitor, so I made the introduction. So I think that's where you think about, always go back to the fundamentals. Your goal is to find the best probability of success every step of the way throughout the process. If you know that referrals and word of mouth is the name of the game, figure out ways that you can get better, more quality referrals, figure out how you can make more relationships, and be very strategic about forming new alliances. Social selling will only help you make those connections.
How would you do an introduction on, let's say, on LinkedIn or some other platform to someone that you want to talk to, a lead, a prospect that you want to reach out to and connect with and potentially explore a relationship and converting them into a customer. How would you go about connecting with them, basically?
Think about what you believe everyone else would do and do the exact opposite. And what I mean by that is, you think about questions that you've gotten on LinkedIn, or think about introductions that you've seen on LinkedIn. You know, you don't want to do the standard connection. You don't want to do, hey, I work with ABC company and we sell this and this, and I'd love to talk to you about how this could help you. That's so canned, and it's going to get the same response that they get, you know, that they give to every other potential client that, or potential suitor that does the same thing. Try to differentiate yourself. Really, again, go back to the fundamentals and think about it. You want to write something and send something that is going to give you the best shot at getting a response. And I don't care how good you are. You're never going to write something that's going to get a response from everybody. And that's why you want to focus with breadth of the business. You know, if I'm going after a potential client or I want to establish relationships there, I'm going to try to connect with 20 people at that company and then have one of them tell me, hey, you need to talk to this person, because then I'm reaching out to that person and saying, hey, Joe Small told me to talk to you about this. It comes a lot farther than just sending a blind, cold email. But as far as from an introduction standpoint, think about the value that you could conceivably add to the relationship. It's going to differ and it's going to vary no matter what company you're working for, what you're selling, or what you're trying to achieve. So I think the key piece here is think about the value that you could bring to the equation. I also don't really like the smoke and mirrors approach either, where you're trying to bait them in by talking about something that may be near and dear to their heart, but that in reality you're just trying to sell them. I'm not a big fan of that. So I think it is important to be very clear and just say, hey, I work for XYZ company. We've got this offering that I've seen has been very valuable in your industry because of this, this, and this. Would love to get your thoughts or your feedback on this. But one thing, and we talked about this earlier too, one thing that I really like doing is just asking them for their insight, their guidance, their thoughts. Maybe you're working on a new vertical and you reach out and you're saying, hey, I'm new to this vertical. I have not worked in this vertical in the past. Based on your expertise, I'd love to just have a conversation just to hear what you think are trends in this business. You've been in this industry for 15, 20 years. I really feel that the relationship could be valuable. And, on the flip side, if there's anything that I can do that would bring value to you, I'm happy to do it. It's challenging sometimes because there may not be any inherent value that you can see on paper that you could bring to this client other than the value that you believe your product or service or solution could bring to them. But a lot of times, especially on social media profiles, there's a lot of things that clients or potential clients will disclose. They may like golf. They may like a particular brand of bourbon. So I think it's important to know these things about the client because sometimes it can give you those unique inroads where you reference, hey, noticed from your profile that you're a golfer. What's your favorite course to play around town? Would love to catch up sometimes. Maybe we can catch a round, and I'd love to hear about what you feel is going on in your industry and how it impacts my industry. Things like that. People like to connect in unique ways. And if you show that you did a little bit of homework, it definitely helps. Just be very strategic about when you time doing that homework, how much you're doing, and where you choose to do it. Because again, your first goal is to make the potential contact. Then you want to be very strategic about how you make the next connection. So, I think that's one of the key pieces when it comes to looking at different ways to leverage social media. And when you're crafting that initial outreach, you want to be very mindful that they are not going to respond to a lot of the messages that they get that are very similar to this. So how am I going to stand out? How am I going to present value? And how am I going to make a personal connection to prompt a different response? In this case, them actually responding and noticing you. And they may not do it right away. I've had clients that it took multiple forms of outreach in order to get them to actually respond. So what I want to say in closing this answer is my answer to this question is going to continue to evolve because what I wrote to clients to get them to accept a a response 5 years ago, to accept a outreach 5 years ago is totally different than what it is today. And I guarantee you that in coming months and years, I'm going to be able to say the same thing. It's going to continue to change. So be very open to evolving and adapting based on what tools are out there from a social media standpoint and what your clients need and what value you feel you bring to your client. Now, again, you are planting seeds and you're growing your business. You're growing your personal brand. So again, that's going to continue to change. So the value that you bring 6 months from now may change 100% because of what value you start to bring today. And that's why I think it's very important to chronicle your journey. Make sure you're making time to blog or add creative content like we talked about before, so that you're sharing that, because it's going to, and resharing things, because my audience in a month is different than my audience today. So they may have a different take entirely on an article that I wrote 2 years ago. So keep in mind that this content can continue to be leveraged, but your initial outreach is going to evolve based on the types of responses that you get, based on the person that you're talking to, and based on the type of conversation that you want to be having with them.
So Carson, what's your ask? What kind of customers are you looking for, or prospects? What can people in the community, in the Business Growth Geniuses group, do to help you?
That's a great question. Obviously I spend a lot of time talking about selling and prospecting and leadership, and that's kind of the fundamentals of what my books have been about. I'm always looking to continue that conversation. So for me, it's a very general question, because there's a lot of different things that I would be happy to have any of those types of conversations, and to see where they lead. So always looking for just different folks to talk to. If my menial experience over the last several years can help anybody, and some of the mistakes that I've made can help anybody make good choices at that stage in their career, I'm always happy to do that, and vice versa. I learned so much about what is top of mind for executives and sales folks in this day and age, just by continuing to have these conversations. Thanks to LinkedIn and thanks to Twitter and thanks to a few of the other media platforms that I've used over the years, I've connected with hundreds of thousands of people across the world, and it's awesome to just have conversations with people at different stages of their career and hear about the different tools that they use, and kind of what they think works, what they think doesn't, and just brainstorming about different things. So I'm always up to talking to different people, just brainstorming ideas, because it helps lend perspective to me, because I can find out about new tools and new things that they're leveraging. So I would love to continue those conversations and have conversations with new folks about the same stuff.
Big thanks. It's been very interesting to have this call on social selling. I hope we're going to have some other calls soon as well. I love this series of live chats. I think that adds a lot of value. Thank you a lot for doing this again.
My pleasure. Always a pleasure, Matt. Always good seeing you. Good talking to you, and look forward to it. Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Sounds good. Have a wonderful day.
Back at you.
Cheers.